We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined this week by John Ferguson, who's the editor of the Sunday Mail, and a special guest, Labour MSP for Central Scotland, Monica Lennon, who I think is making her Planet Holyrood debut. Is that right?
That's correct.
So the main thing today in Scottish politics was Nigel Farage's chaotic press conference at a hotel near Uphall. To say it was a car crash would be a complete understatement. Before we come to why it was so chaotic, we'll talk first about the main revelation, which was the defection of the Tory MSP Graeme Simpson to Reform. Monica, he is a Central Scotland MSP like you. I've heard a rumour that once upon a time you actually hugged a tree with him, correct?
I didn't realise we were going to start there. Well, I've known Graeme a long time. We were councillors together in South Lanarkshire Council. Graeme was a councillor in East Kilbride and I was in Hamilton. And so as long as I've known Graeme, he's been a Tory. He's been a councillor, I think, from 2007. And we were elected to Parliament at the same time. We'll talk about the politics of it, but one of the interests that Graeme Simpson has as an MSP is nature. So I'm not sure how well that will go down with his new friends in Reform. Yeah. So he is a bit of a tree hugger, as am I. There's no shame in that. So we were on a parliamentary visit with other colleagues, including Mark Ruskell from the Greens, and the three of us did hug a tree in Scotland rainforest, and Graeme really enjoyed it. He shared that story in Parliament at other events, but I'm not sure if that'll fit in now with his new cronies in Reform. So I'm not
sure. Graeme Reform are not exactly known for their love of the environment and climate change activism, are they?
Well, they certainly like to talk down the needs for climate action. Is it net stupid zero and things like that to say, but if you want people to be more at risk of their houses being flooded and, our bills going up in the future. But the serious point is, it's been rumoured for a while that Graeme Simpson was probably on that watch list of who's likely to go to Reform. It's not for me to say, it's because that's going to be an easier route to get re-elected to Parliament, but it's quite likely now he'll be top of the list for Reform UK and Central Scotland, and that could give him, almost guaranteed return to the Parliament. But I think it shows that the Scottish Tories are pretty much done. I mean, Russell Findlay must be wondering between now and Tuesday when the Parliament returns, like, how many MSPs will he have when he goes back? He's lost Jamie Green already. He lost Jeremy Balfour last week. It's not good for the Scottish Tories. But I think for the voters, when they, do get the chance to vote next year, when they look at the Reform candidates, it's pretty much the Scottish Tories with one or two exceptions.
Were you surprised that he defected? I mean, doesn't strike me as being a true believer when it comes to reform. I wouldn't describe him as moderate, but he's not a headbanger when it comes to right-wing Tory politics. And just, to me, it reeks of careerism more than an ideological commitment to what Nigel Farage stands for.
I think a lot of people are making that conclusion out of it. I mean, don't want to make this all about Graeme Simpson. He can advertise himself, but I do know that Graeme, he works hard, he puts in a shift. He's been pretty good on some issues that maybe the Tories haven't been great on, like try to promote public transport. Like I said, on nature, I've got a members' bill on ecocide, and that's about looking at severe environmental harm, looking at the most serious crimes. And Graeme was one of the first MSPs to sign that on a cross-party basis. Again, I don't know if that really fits with the narrative of Reform UK, where they want to be, we're against all this, and everything to do with the environment is apparently woke. So who knows? But the thing about Reform UK and Scotland, they don't actually have a leader. They've kind of got a spokesperson, I guess, and Thomas Kerr, who's a councillor in Glasgow.
They've got a group leader at Holyrood, one Graeme Simpson.
But again, it's chaotic, isn't it? Because I think previously Reform UK have said we won't have a leader in Scotland until after the Holyrood elections. Now Nigel Farage is in town saying, oh, there will be a leader. I mean, he is the leader. So if you're voting for Reform, you know, that's who you're being led by. But of course, Graeme Simpson is not the first Reform UK MSP.
Yes, no, that we'll come to that. That was one of the gaffes at this pretty memorable press conference. I mean, just one of the last things on the actual defection, John. I think the Sunday Mail had a story a while back, was it a few weeks ago, which sort of suggested that Simpson might be a potential defector.
I mean, we'd heard that this was in the pipeline, and at the time, you know, he was denying it, but you got the feeling that he wasn't denying it quite as wholeheartedly as he could have done. I'd agree it does feel like a very opportunistic move, which I think Conservatives tend to be quite opportunistic in nature, and so Russell Finlay will be very worried that there's going to be more similar defections. I think if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, I'm probably going to be out of a job in less than a year with Reform, I've got a better chance of staying in it, and so I'm going to jump ship. It's sad, but Nigel Farage, politics can be a great thing that can bring people, when it brings people together around a shared purpose. Unfortunately, Nigel Farage seems absolutely hell-bent on using it to divide people, and it's quite sad to see people who become MSPs, you would hope for the right reasons, now jumping onto that bandwagon.
So I was at this press conference, and just looking back, it was a smorgasbord of catastrophe for Reform. I mean, I don't really know where to begin. I think the most dramatic moment was, obviously, they had this defection. They were very proud of it. And then maybe about 3/4 of the way through the press conference, Rebecca McCurdy, a journalist at the Herald, read out a Tory source quote to Graeme Simpson, and this was it. Graeme Simpson is a pathetic, nasty little man who won't be missed. Just last year, he had to apologise to a young female member of staff for acting in a totally inappropriate, bullying and intimidating way towards her. The way he spoke to her was so bad that he was forced to sit down and say sorry in person. He'll be more trouble than he's worth for Reform. Now, Graeme Simpson completely denied that, but it derailed the entire press conference. We also had the spectacle of Farage denying that he's got a woman problem, but then forgetting, as you alluded to, Monica, that the first ever Reform MSP being Michelle Ballantyne. He claimed that Graeme Simpson was the first, but he airbrushed Michelle Ballantyne out of history. He then repeated the politically crazy view that there should be a sort of rethink of the Barnett formula, which is how the Scottish Parliament is funded. Saying that 9 months before a Scottish Parliament election is ridiculous. And then I eventually got my question, and I sort of got in his face about Vladimir Putin and why Scottish voters do not like him. And I think we can just watch that clip just now. If you look at the opinion polls, Reform UK are doing much better in England than they are in Scotland. So I was just wondering, why do so many Scottish voters find you to be so repellent? And secondly, you've always been a Putin fanboy. Are you hopeful that Russia gets to hold on to the land that they illegally seized from Ukraine?
Yeah, it's a delightful tone of question. Thank you so much for coming along and making our morning. I think it's absolutely marvellous. I have absolutely condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
You're soft on Putin.
Interestingly, you based that falsehood on one interview I gave in 2014 when I said I admired him as a political operator but didn't like him as a man. Just a few years before that, he was given a state visit to Buckingham Palace. He was welcomed by a Labour government. He was welcomed by the Queen. In fact, he met the Queen again just a few years later. So one comment taken hopelessly and completely...
What is it you admire about him?
...of context. No.
What do you admire about him?
I'll repeat, for your benefit, that in 2014, in one interview, I said I admired him as a political operator, but not as a human being, that I didn't like him. I wouldn't like to live in Russia.
Is that why Scots find you so repellent, do you think?
Do you know what? I mean, that is so low grade, it's almost astonishing. We are doing remarkably well in Scotland. You know it, and that's possibly why you're so upset.
So, John, his new recruit was embroiled in allegations of inappropriate behaviour towards a female staffer, which he denies. Farage was grilled about his so-called woman problem. He messed up again on the Barnett formula, and he got tetchy when asked about his previous support for Putin. Wasn't a great day in the office for Farage, was it?
It was pretty bad. I mean, at least, Graham's hugged a tree. He's now going to be comfortable having a bunch of colleagues who are thick as two short planks. It's always been a problem for Farage, isn't it? He just doesn't really get Scotland at all. He always has a hard time when he comes up here and does press conferences. It's why he very rarely does. I guess the kind of difficult thing for all of us is the fact that, unfortunately, it does look like he's going to pick up a lot of votes, and the challenges for, I think, the other parties as well as journalists to really try to tell the truth about what Reform are and what their agenda is. And what we know is that there's not really much to it other than being anti-immigration. There is no policy platform to speak of, really, is there? We don't really know what he thinks about health or education or public services.
We do know what he thinks about rails. He's a real danger to the NHS. We've talked about that in the Sunday Meal.
Yeah, other than that, he's a Thatcherite and underlying all this kind of warm words about perhaps nationalising this and that. He's not really into any of that stuff at all. He's a proper right-winger, and, his only real policy that he believes will appeal to normal people is this anti-immigration stance.
Yeah, I mean, Monica, obviously the broader point, apart from today's shambles, the broader point is that they're doing extremely well in the polls for Holyrood. It looks like they could win maybe 15 MSPs, mostly at the expense of the Conservatives. If the current polling was replicated next May, they'd have an incredible night. And they are tapping into public concerns about immigration. I mean, you've written about Reform in your Sunday Mail columns before. From a centre-left perspective, what do you think is the best way for parties like Labour to combat Reform?
So I think all of us in the so-called mainstream parties, I suppose I'm sitting here with the mainstream media, but, we have to be honest about the challenges that people face in their lives. Of course, Scotland has a housing crisis. The NHS is on its knees. Education is not delivering for the skills that we need for the future. So people want better. They deserve better. We've just managed to kick the Tories out after 14 years of austerity. The UK Labour government isn't getting everything right, but it's doing some amazing things, and we need to tell that story better as a Labour Party. And by the way, Nigel Farage and his cronies down in Westminster, they voted against, enhancing workers' rights. They wouldn't want trade unions, they wouldn't want minimum wage and living wage and things like that. And with the NHS, their solution is to bring in a US style of kind of insurance scheme. So they're no friend to the working classes. They're a threat to the working classes. So I think it's important people like me don't go out and dismiss people's fears, because if you've been on a housing waiting list for 10 years and then Nigel Farage comes along and tells you, oh, it's because of asylum seekers that you can't get a house, people are going to give that a hearing. But John is right. They don't have policies. They don't have credible costed plans, but they're being disruptive. And that has always been Nigel Farage's way. I mean, how many parties has he actually been in? To break more than one hand, I'm not sure.
UKIP, Brexit Party.
He probably can't remember himself. And he ends up leaving chaos behind. So what he's got in his favour right now, he's got a platform. He knows how to use it. We're talking about him right now. But whether it's BBC Question Time or using TikTok and social media to get their point across, they are cutting through to different age groups, different demographics, different parts of the country. But we've had experience of them now in a Holyrood election. We had the by-election in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. And everyone talked up Reform UK, including John Swinney. The First Minister said, in fact, I think it was the front page of the Daily Record.
Well, thanks for
it wasn't the Sunday Mail, it was the Daily Record, saying, you have to vote SNP to stop Reform. Now, Reform did come third, and they were a bit of a joke in that campaign. I mean, they had a couple of funny videos. Nigel Farage brought an open-top bus to Hamilton, but he actually went into hiding. He couldn't walk about in Hamilton. They went to a butcher's in Blackhall, and the backlash to that butcher's, who then put out a notice saying, oh, we didn't invite them here, we didn't know they were coming in, they're not going to be welcome again. So that's why he doesn't come to Scotland very often. But we're not complacent in Scottish Labour. We know that, in council by-elections and that Holyrood by-election, they have been picking up votes. But when it comes to it next May, people know they've got a real choice. If you do want a change in Scotland, if you want a new direction, we need to get a different government. If you put your vote into Reform, that's just going to help the SNP. So you might get more of the same. But we've got a job to do in Scottish Labour as we get closer to the election to show people our policies and plans. And I think they can see in Anna Sarwar someone who's serious about public service and leading the country. Nigel Farage is only in it for themselves. And we know that with the company that he keeps and his pals, and always try to cozy up to Trump, and that's not really worked out for
I
them.
think people have to remember that, I think one important point is that illegal immigration is actually only 4% of immigration into the UK. At the moment, the impression you would get from all of the hype around asylum hotels and all the rest of it was that is, the majority of immigration. It's just not. It's a tiny fraction of it. And that illegal immigration has been driven more than anything else by Brexit. I mean, there's been loads of disastrous consequences of Brexit, and that's probably the main one that Nigel Farage now is suggesting that the architect of Brexit, and now that's been given him another situation to try to get even more power on the back of. So I think the media and the other parties need to really, kind of try and drive that sort of message home. And it's really concerning when you see when you see really a lot of young people supporting Reform, and it's
particularly young men.
Yeah, and they are being sold a pup, aren't they? And it's a very difficult thing to combat if you're one of the other parties who are trying to come up with sensible, rational policies for the country.
I think, Paul, from your questions to Farage today about, the people that he admires, like Vladimir Putin, I mean, to say, well, I don't like him as a person, but I admire him as a political operator, what does that actually mean?
I think it means you like him.
If that's who you see as a role model, and then the stuff about Andrew Tate, and we know the serious allegations linked to him as well. We know about the rise in misogyny, young men being radicalised online as well. There's just a lot of unrest in society. People want to feel safer. They want to feel that they're working and they're getting the rewards. And, we can all understand that, but we know that Reform UK don't have the answers to these big problems, and the world is becoming, more complicated. We need people who can work internationally and understand diplomacy. And we've got Nigel Farage now talking about getting rid of, the Human Rights Act and ripping up the Good Friday Agreement. We've had peace in Northern Ireland for more than 30 years, and he's just so flippant about these things.
I mean, Brexit nearly fatally damaged the Good Friday Agreement. Now he's come back to finish the job. I mean, I think if you look at politics from a Labour perspective, I agree that what's crucial is that you deal with the underlying issues that are making people vote for reform. So, you fix public services, you ensure that the cost of living crisis is a thing of the past, you deal with people's anxieties about immigration. In terms of messaging, I mean, I was at the press conference today and I was just looking at all the Reform politicians. You had Thomas Kerr, former Tory, Ross Lambie, former Tory, Graeme Simpson, former Tory. I mean, they are the Tories in disguise. They try and give the impression that, they want nationalisation and, they're a friend of the working man. But, I mean, 90% of them are probably former Tory supporters.
And they're the kind of Tories that probably would have objected to the Scottish Parliament existing in the first place.
I just don't buy this argument that, they're straddling the left-right divide. Once you scratch the surface at people like Farage, they are Thatcherites, they are a bunch of Tory spivs. And I think it's up to parties of the centre-left, whether that's Labour or the SNP, to expose that, because they're getting an easy ride just now. There's no doubt about it. People are disappointed with the Labour government. They're disappointed with the SNP government. They remember how awful the last Tory lot were, and they just see this shiny new toy. And right now it's the perfect set of circumstances for reform, and it looks like I don't think the bubble's going to burst in time for the Holyrood election. I think they will make significant gains, unfortunately, but that's where we are, isn't it, with politics just now?
I mean, we're at a point where the Parliament's due to go back next week. We've had the summer recess. We've all been out in our local communities, speaking to people, listening to voters, speaking to small businesses. So we're getting back to Parliament. We're not going to have the usual set piece from John Swinney in terms of programme for government, because he brought that forward. But we're going back to a bit of chaos in the Scottish Government too. Let's be honest, Kate Forbes, as Deputy First Minister, has signalled that she wants to leave as well. They're losing a lot of people. But, the SNP are going to have to try and frame it and announce something. The Tories, Russell Findlay gets maybe, 15 minutes on a Thursday to try and set out his stall, and that's just not really working for them. But, I think Scottish Labour, what we have been effective at is holding the Scottish Government to account, showing where things are not working and putting out plans where we think, money could be saved. I mean, Anas Hours made a really good point about the new Barlinnie prison that's been proposed. Initially, the SNP said that would cost around £100 million, and people agree that we need to have a new prison estate. We've got overcrowded prisons. It's a very old prison, but currently it's now costed at £1 billion. And people are right to ask the government, well, how has it become so much more expensive? And we're not even confident they could stick to £1 billion. But we're still quite a bit out from the election. What is it? 8 months to go, I think. So it's too early for us to put our manifesto out there. Frankly, if we did that, the SNP would steal all our good policies, as they usually do. But we do know we need to be in there in the communities. That's why we're doing that. We've got our candidates selected in most areas. That's almost done. I'm really delighted to be candidate for Rutherglen and Cambuslang in Blantyre, which is my hometown. But we need to get out there and be positive. I think the point about, you said disappointment in the UK Labour government, we're not dismissing people who feel frustrated right now. Again, I was listening to Anas Hour talking this week, and he's right to say that, people's mortgages have come down. Many workers have had a pay rise, but we've still got a lot of work to do around energy bills. We've seen that again today. Maybe we weren't clear enough in managing expectations, because you can't come in after 14 years of the Tories and fix everything overnight. So people are hungry for that change that was promised. So we need to get on and deliver that. And we're doing it.
GB Energy, a bit of action around that policy. Haven't heard much from it for a while.
Well, I mean, an Act of Parliament had to be brought in around that, and that's been passed now. So Michael Shanks is a neighbouring colleague of mine. He's working very hard on that portfolio. I think it is about trying to unlock opportunities. It's about saying, well, the public sector, the state can't do everything, but what else needs to happen? I mean, under the Tories, one of the big issues around grid connection, and that's been a real sort of bottleneck. The planning system, I used to be a planner many years ago now, and again, in Scotland, under the SNP, we've got a massive shortage of planners. There's been delays at a UK level. So things are starting to change, but a lot of that is probably quite boring for the public. It's the stuff that happens behind the scenes that people frankly don't really care about, but they just want governments to get on and do it. So I think, Angela Rayner's department, Ed Miliband's team are doing a lot around that. But people need to see that in their bills. The cost of living is still the biggest issue, and people feel in Britain they're ripped off, not just in energy, but the cost of your weekly shop, putting your car on the road. So people do feel that it's very, very expensive to live here.
I'm confident that the cost of living crisis will be a thing of the past come the general election. I guess the challenge for Labour is it going to be the rearview mirror come the Holyrood election? There's a sense it's a race against time, that I know people in Scottish Labour want to see more progress, faster progress when it comes to making sure people feel better off. Because right now, you're right that interest rates are coming down, but inflation is going up. And I think if people feel better off, the Labour government will get the credit for that. I think it's a work in progress, and we know we need to really get that right. The other thing to remember as well, though, is that, since Labour came in last summer, and it only was last summer, we've now seen a record settlement to the Scottish Parliament, the biggest settlement in devolution. So the SNP have been given, a nice settlement from the Labour government. We are rightly asking questions about the choices that they're making around it. I was speaking to someone who works quite senior in the NHS. I was having a chat with them recently, and they were telling me they feel really quite frustrated that there's quite a lot of money that's not used in a smart way. So there is a lot of inefficiency. I don't think the SNP have been in power now for 18 years, have really embraced technology in a way that they need to. I was at my GP recently and I could see the screen. They were just checking about a scan that I have to get, and another doctor put a note on, but it was handwritten and we couldn't work out what it said. And it's like, can we not just be using technology a bit better? Because it's like the ATM lottery to get a GP appointment, which just does my head in. Yeah, and not everyone can be on standby to get that appointment on the day. I know at my GP, if you do phone at 8, maybe wait about half an hour to get through, but there's a good chance they will offer you something that day. But not everyone's in a job, or if you've got childcare responsibilities or you're caring for someone, you can't drop everything to be there at 11 o'clock or 3 p.m. So it's just that flexibility, why can't you have an app where they can try and book an appointment, especially if it's not something urgent? If you maybe could see a doctor in 2 weeks' time, make that appointment. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. I know Jackie Bailey, who leads for us on health, and Sarah are former dentists. They want to find those practical solutions, but it is making sure that it's the NHS that we all know and recognise, free at the point of need. There is a political dimension to this. It was the Labour Party that created the NHS. Going back to the forum, when people say, well, we don't know what reform would do and what are the policies, but we know Farage has got pretty strong views about the NHS and how that should operate. And I'm afraid it would be his rich friends that would benefit from that. From one rogue to another, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, looks like he's launching a new party, which is provisionally called Your Party. Sounds like the worst name for a political party I've ever heard. Absolutely dreadful. We all know what Jeremy Corbyn stands for in terms of international affairs and sort of domestic policies he wants, given that he fought 2 elections for Labour. There are suggestions, Monica, that your party might put up candidates in the Holyrood election. Are you worried? Is this a threat to Labour? So I can't remember when exactly Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana announced that they were going to form a party. It still doesn't have a name. So is it formally registered as a party yet? I don't even know.
I think so.
They've been asking, with the electoral commission. So they've been asking people to sign up to a mailing list, and it's like there's a crowd sourcing a name. I mean, I think there's some good people who maybe have got involved in it, who have good intentions, solid socialist principles, but to build a political party, especially this close to elections in the Scottish Parliament, elections in Wales, I think there's more council elections in England next year, they're really up against the clock. So I'm not sure that they'll get their act together to have candidates, to have a manifesto ahead of May. I mean, if they do, that's up to them, but I think it's a bit of a distraction really when, in the Scottish Parliament, we do need
political parties who understand Scotland. You know, you were right to say Nigel Farage doesn't really get Scotland. He's up here. He doesn't really know how devolution works, doesn't know about the Scottish Parliament, doesn't know the people involved. And I think this maybe has the same
I know.
kind of vibe.
A whiff of London about
I mean, there's a few names being mentioned, people who might be involved, but again, there will be some people who were formerly Labour, like Jeremy Corbyn, but I think there'd be a lot of people kind of on the margins who maybe, again, if you were doing your due diligence, maybe wouldn't be great ambassadors.
But
Gently put.
I don't think you can underestimate the potential power that the Corbyn brand has in the UK. He was, for a period, very, very popular. You do just feel that this new party, I mean, if you could even call it a party in all but name, but you can't because it doesn't even have... Yeah, it's
a concept at the moment, isn't it?
At the moment, I'm not sure if I agree with the idea that people do want to get involved in politics to that degree that they even want to choose the name. I think that by and large, most people have got busy lives. They've got a lot on. They want someone to say, here's what we're called. Here's what we stand for. Do you want to vote for us or not? And so I wouldn't discount them getting their act together, but at the moment, it just doesn't feel that they're going to have tried on numerous occasions to get a hold of Jeremy or anyone really from the party to talk to us. We're one of the few papers that would give them a fair hearing. It's radio silence. You'll get a response to a WhatsApp message and then nothing after that. So it just all feels a bit disorganised at the moment, and it's a shame because I think if they did get their act together, then they could potentially do pretty well. I think people want to. I mean, you kind of know already what they would be standing on. It'd be a platform of a very strong, consistent line on Gaza, which I think is sadly lacking in the other mainstream parties. And I think that the place that could potentially cause problems for the Labour Party is that there would be a very strong policy on inequality. They would be talking about wealth taxes and about real wealth distribution in the UK, which I don't think we're really getting from the other parties either. So there's potential there. We just feel that there's, that nobody really has the wherewithal to actually create something. I mean, it's not easy creating a new political party. The last time round, Corbyn at least had the machinery of the Labour Party behind him for a time at least.
He doesn't strike me as being an admin sort of guy.
No, I don't know whether he's someone who can actually build
I think Jeremy and Zarah Sultana, who I know both of them personally, have a lot of respect for them. They're very principled. So I think people respect that in politics, and you'll always kind of know what they stand for. Although I slightly caveat that because, again, if they're building a big coalition and it's attracting in people kind of on the margins and including people on the real far left, you can kind of get almost like you've got far left populism and then you've got the same with the far right and Farage and so on. So there's a lot of kind of undesirables on the fringes of all of this. And I hate to say, Labour, we're a mainstream party, but we're an established party. We've got a proud history. We've come out of the trade union movement as the political wing of that. We've still got that very close connection with the trade union movement. I mean, you look at some of the best achievements so far of this UK Labour government is that New Deal for working people, enhancing people's rights at work, whether that's for, maternity rights, paternity leave, increasing the minimum wage. In Scotland, that has benefited, I think, 200,000 of the lowest paid workers in Scotland. These are big things, but it doesn't dominate the news in the way Graeme Simpson's defecting to Reform UK does. And no disrespect to Graeme, who's been a colleague for a long time, but, Graeme won't really be that well known across the country, maybe in East Kilbride, where, he's had a bigger profile there. And I'm pretty sure Nigel Farage didn't know Graeme Simpson until he met him at 11 o'clock and was it West Lothian this morning? You know, what did the West Lothian do to deserve all of this? But
He didn't know the names of the two councillors that defected either, did he? I mean,
that was a moment,
the
wasn't it?
tragedy of Corbyn's new party is that really there should be a place for Corbyn in the Labour Party. There's that fascinating stat that I don't think Tony Blair chucked anyone out of the Labour Party in all the time that he was quite a controversial leader. You know, he really did take them away from that a more left-wing.
George Galloway was kicked out.
Did he?
I think he was expelled
completely.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It was a rarity.
But you know, the people breaking the whip went automatically put out.
There should be a place for people like Jeremy Corbyn within the Labour Party. I think people want that. You know, there was our other columnist, Brian Leishman, said, I think there's a quote from an old Labour leader that you need a left and right wing to fly. And
well, Brian's a good colleague, and I hope to see him back with the Labour whip soon. But I think, and you know, we're talking a lot about the UK party and the UK government, but we're facing a devolved election, a Holyrood election. You know, and Zarah is his own man, and I think he's been quite clear on that. And this will be a Scottish campaign led in Scotland. You know, you've got Zarah and Jackie Baillie, quite a formidable duo. So our policies will have to work for the people of Scotland. They'll have to be credible in a devolved context. But the difference is we want to be a party that is a sort of broad church. We are a broad movement, but we want to be able to work with our colleagues across the UK as well, not just at Westminster, but we've seen that with Manchester. You know, Andy Burnham and Zarah have worked quite well together on the issue about buses. You know, why can't the Scottish Government retain something like Alexander Dennis to manufacture buses? You know, we've got Andy Burnham doing some really good things around public transport. So working with the mayors, working with our colleagues in Wales, UK, but beyond that, you know, I know Anas is very determined that we're ambitious for Scotland and that we can support businesses who want to trade. I was doing a local visit today, Equi's Ice Cream, headquartered in Rutherglen, and they're really ambitious about getting their products into new markets. They've been doing quite well in America, but they need support from the Scottish Government. They need support at a UK level as well. So the benefit of voting Labour in Scotland is that, you know, you'll have a Scottish Labour government working well with a UK Labour government. You know, the SNP are now trying to go back to their default position. Well, we just need to be independent and then everything will be fine. And I just don't think people are going to buy into that.
Okay, well, I think
another podcast, maybe.
Yeah, maybe buses and ice cream is a different podcast. But yeah, I know, I take the point you're making. I think we've run out of time, so thanks very much to Monica and to John for joining me. You can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or watch on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.